A warm welcome to our Macquarie Business School alumni and friends here tonight. It's a great turnout. Today's interactive and a fast-paced event will kick off with a short key talk from our mentoring gurus and our very own alumni, Fiona Pearman, co-founders of Pearman and Partners, and Kate Boorer, CEO at Young Professional Women Australia, who work tirelessly towards creating inclusive workplaces for the future. And we also have Oscar Trimboli, highly sought after keynote speaker, author, and mentor. Oscar is also the host of an award-winning podcast called The Deep Listening and a proud alumnus of Macquarie Business School. I know our key speakers are ready to share the wealth of knowledge they have gained from years of coaching and mentoring leaders and organizations around the world. So without further delay, I would like to welcome our first two alumni guest speakers, Fiona Pearman and Kate Boorer.
Thanks so much. So welcome everyone. Lovely to be here with you, and thanks for that warm introduction. Excited to be part of this inaugural event of the Lift Speed Mentoring Program. Fee, do you want to just do a quick intro?
Yes, thank you so much for having us here. It is really a delight to be back amongst fellow Macquarie alumni, and just really keen to hear from you, questions you have and that sort of thing around networking, and to share a little bit of what we've found over the last few years.
Yeah, awesome. And so I think one of the things that sessions like this always have is normally we put questions into the chat feed. What I'm going to suggest today, because we've got a stack of time after you've heard from the three of us in your group mentoring sessions, is grab a pen, write them down, so that when we do hit the breakouts and you've got time to ask some questions of your various mentors, that you've got some ready to go. Okay. All right. So let's dive in. I've just pressed start on my time. So we've got lots to cover, and I know Oscar's got some great things to share with you as well. I think what we really wanted to take this conversation around mentoring and network up to a whole new level, and really talk about, the value of building a mentor, the value of building network. And I think this is a really interesting one. You'll hear more about us later. But I think, there's this piece in this concept, particularly early in our career, where we feel like we've got to do it all on our own. And so we always language around work hard, know your stuff, and, kind of work away. And whilst some of us start to build network naturally within our organisation with people we meet on projects that we work with and things like that, we're not often great at holding those networks. I know a lot of clients that I've worked with will always reference, I've been great at building network inside my organisation, but then I leave that organisation and I go to a new organisation and I've left that whole network behind. So I think there's a few important things here in terms of, the value of network. For me, it's around leverage. I'm all about what's the quick way, not work harder, but all about working smarter. So how do we actually build relationship and leverage network? But also, how do we go about accessing opportunities? And Fiona, I know you'll talk a bit more about this, but we hear stories. I have got so many people within my network who talk regularly about how perhaps they'll finish a role in an organisation and they'll reach out to their network and say, hey, I'm looking for my next role, or I'm back on the market, or whatever language they want to reference to. And, literally they're just sitting down having coffees with a few people, and a couple of weeks later, they've got their next role. And I think that plays out the more senior you get. Fee, do you want to pick up there?
Yes, I think the piece here that sometimes people struggle with is we use this term network or networking, and it can feel a little bit intimidating, as though there's something kind of magical or very challenging that has to be done. And actually what we really hold is that, network is very much about building relationship. It's very much about how am I connected to other people? How do I stay in touch with people that are important? And how do I reach out and make the most of people who are sort of in that peripheral network? There's ways in which there's a lot of things that go on within industries, within alumni, as we're doing tonight. There's a lot of places that we can actually choose to show up and to have better connections, to really start to understand what other people's experience is like beyond our immediate workplace. I think that's the real key here is, as Kate said, not to get locked into one version of things, but to start to explore and experiment and be open to the idea that this idea of networking is really about accessing more opportunities than I would have if I just stayed in a fairly contained kind of smaller group.
Yeah, I've had, interestingly, someone from an old workplace network reach out to me a couple of years ago. We haven't worked together for 10 years. And he was just saying that he wanted to chat with me just about some stuff that was going on for his wife and whether I could have a chat with her. But she'd been in an organisation for 8 years and, you know, was just in this bubble-like experience. And it was actually that conversation that really drove home the importance and the value of the different perspectives that you get when you have a network of like-minded people that sit outside your organisation as well. I think one of the things we wanted to share, Fiona and I 2 years ago co-authored a book called Core Confidence, and what you see here is the 10 building blocks to core confidence. You'll see at the top this piece around build relationships and ask for help, and just we talk about how do you navigate career, particularly the more senior you get. You know, work hard, know your stuff. That is the gateway and that is the entry pathway for us early in our career. And of course, all of those things still continue to be important. But what we've seen is this piece around build relationships. And I think there's an important distinction here around the concept of networking versus building relationships. You know, often networking is about connecting and finding, I guess, common ground. Building relationships is about the conversations that you're going to have after you've had that initial contact. And so I think if we circle back to this piece around buy, build, network, because it makes everything else a whole lot easier. Yeah, it makes this piece around knowing your stuff. It's easy to be across the latest information if there's a couple of you who are staying across that and can, you know, mastermind together once a month. It's easier to navigate some of the tough stuff if you've got a support network, be that mentors, be that peers or sponsors who can actually help you through some of the tough stuff. And so I think for us, is there anything more you want to say on that, Fee, before we move into who to build network with?
No, I think that would be a good place. I wanted you to get to that slide before we... and look, I think this piece about, you know, just getting conscious of who is it that would be valuable and useful. And this is a two-way street, right? You know, we talk about network, but actually network is relationship. So it means that we're going to be in exchange with other people. We're going to be giving and taking probably in a good balanced way. And this piece about, you know, where are the people that I would have something in common with? Where are they congregating? How would I meet them? How will I enter into interesting conversations? And as Kate said, how will I continue those conversations throughout, you know, our next phase of, you know, initially we might just be associates or work contacts, but then, you know, often these things develop into friendships. And I think the more we're aware that there's a deeper layer to this than just having a whole lot of contacts on LinkedIn, that's not really a network. That's just a whole lot of contacts. When we get into really what networking is about and this relationship piece, we're really asking people to think about connections and a deeper connection that's going to sustain over a longer period of time.
Yeah, and so I think important to pick up there, absolutely relationship. I would say sort of 10 years ago when I left my corporate career, I'm a chartered accountant in stage 1 of my career life cycle. I would say when I came into my second stage, I didn't really have a network. I was great at building relationship in my organizations. When I left those organizations, I might stay in contact with a past boss, but I wasn't great at bringing that network with me. It was actually, interestingly, when I sat down with a recruiter, kind of starting to look at what my future would look like, she said, so talk to me about your network. And I just went blank and went, oh, don't really have one of those. And so, you know, that was a good 11 years ago, well before LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn has absolutely changed the face of our ability to reach out and connect with people. You know, in the past 10 years, I have built relationships where I've reached out cold with people on LinkedIn, or I've perhaps seen them on something like this, and followed up and said, hey, I really enjoyed what you shared. Would love to jump on a call and have a chat. The one thing I say to everyone is, you know, you will be surprised at how generous people are with their time. I had a client who was on a mentor walk session only recently, and because obviously COVID, they can't do that. They can't go out walking, so it was done by Zoom. Anyway, there was a tech issue, and, you know, for whatever reason, it shut down. And so this client reached out to this mentor who was in her room and said, hey, we got cut off. I was really loving what you were sharing. Would it be okay if we pick that conversation up on a telephone call? Now, here's the thing. They would have been in a room. She was in a room with like 3 or 4 other people. She reached out on LinkedIn, connected and asked for help and asked to continue a conversation, and a whole bunch of other people didn't. And now that initial reach out and contact has now translated into an informal mentoring relationship where they're catching up every 2 weeks, because this particular client of mine has been redeployed into an area of the business that is kind of pretty much well outside her comfort zone. And this person is an expert in that space as well. So I think there's always this piece around, it feels really uncomfortable often. Some of us are, have just kind of gotten really used to it and don't worry so much about it anymore. I know when I was having to kind of get my network mojo on early in running a business, I'd kind of take a big deep breath and walk into the room full of people who I didn't know and walk up and say, hi, I'm Kate, and you know, kind of lean into those conversations. I didn't love them, but I guess the reframe that I really put into it was, hey, I'm here to connect, meet some people. We'll either, you know, find some common ground and we'll resonate, which interestingly is exactly how Fiona and I met. It was a recruiter contact of mine who knew her husband, who, when I sat down with Fi's husband, said, you guys should have a coffee. And that was 7 years ago or so. Fi, do you want to pick up on that?
Yes, I think this idea that being open to opportunity is really not thinking there's only one way I can do it, because people come into our lives in so many different ways. And if we are more creative and more open and thinking about in what ways might I stay in touch with people, with this person, if I have a connection with them, even if it's, Kate said, it's someone that I see more as a peripheral sort of thing, or I hear about them, or I'm listening to something and I think, gee, I'm really interested. Because we have platforms like LinkedIn, and because we're now in a semi-virtual world, there are ways that we can pick up, and there are ways that we can actually step into, and I think give more attention to those connections and those people who, in some way, we go, you know, there's going to be something good's going to come out of that. We don't know what it is yet, but I'm prepared to be curious and invested and interested enough to see where this takes me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have countless stories, countless professional relationships that have turned into friendships incredible. I would suggest that my network actually now is probably one of my biggest professional assets. But I think the next piece that we want to circle in before we close out on our session, because I know Oscar's going to talk going a little bit more deeper around mentoring, but also looking at, okay, well, you know, if I'm thinking about building relationships for support, for leverage, to access opportunities, you know, how do I maybe think about that in a different way? But we want to talk about, you know, the importance of asking for help. Right? So we talk about, it's one thing to build relationships. And I think many of us, once we kind of get the concept that it's important to do that inside and outside our organization, we're like, oh, okay, most of us are pretty good at that. The next piece is really around actually translating those relationships to asking for help. And I think, you know, I'm going to put my hand up absolutely and say I was spent years getting out there, building relationships, doing that part really well, but not actually reaching out and asking for help so well. And I recall a time I used to run a big International Women's Day event every year, 300 people in a room, kind of sucked up my February and March every year. But every year I'd leave the panel discussion till a little bit late. And so one year I was like, no, I'm going to get ahead on this. And I just jumped on LinkedIn and I put out a post saying, hey, I'm looking for experts within organizations to talk about their experience of flexibility. You know, if you know anyone, please let me know. And I got, within like 3 days, I got 3 amazing speakers who weren't immediately in my network, but were introduced to me from someone else within my network as well. So I think this piece around, actually, it's one thing to have the relationships. It's the next thing is to actually reach out and ask for help, and getting over the things that get in the way, which is, you know, fear of a no, or, you know, fear of perhaps looking weak, incompetent, or all of those sorts of things. And so I think the final piece that we want to do in the last couple of minutes we've got remaining is probably lean into a short discussion on, you know, how do we go about asking for help, which seems really silly in kind of concept. But we know that all of us, particularly, you know, esteemed, you know, highly educated, highly experienced professionals, you know, this piece is where we often come unstuck.
Yeah, I think this, you know, it's so interesting for us coaching and working with some very, very senior people. And, you know, just learning how much we kind of buck up against this thing of what it takes to ask for help. And we have all this meaning making we do. It's really quite fascinating that we've decided that asking for help is actually something that I'm not going to do because of. There's all these reasons we don't do it. And as Kate said, you know, sometimes we're fearful of a no, sometimes we're worried what people will think. But what we've really found is that the more that you get practiced at asking for help, the more you're prepared to lean into this, the easier it gets, and the more you'll be surprised by how much people enjoy helping. Just, you know, an example tonight is there's all these people who put their hands up to be facilitators and mentors and to speak here because they care and because they want to share something with you. So generally people actually love to be asked. And if you think yourself about when you're asked to help someone, what do? Do you enjoy it? Do you like it? Do you like the feeling, you know, what happens between you when you help someone? One of the things we say about asking for help is, why would you deny someone the joy of helping you? So I think sometimes we need to reframe this and think of small requests we can make in order to take our first steps and get more comfortable with this notion that asking for help is a good thing.
Yeah, and so I think we've just got a few small steps there in terms of the how to, and don't underestimate actually perhaps how tough this is. And it may be a conversation you want to start in your breakouts. It may be a conversation you want to reflect on after this, particularly if you're sitting there like me and saying, hey, you know what, actually, I've really invested some good time in building relationships, but perhaps I'm not leveraging them in the way that I could. And so we talk here about, you know, the first piece is start small. You know, look at small steps that you can, you know, or chunk it down into small steps where it feels a little bit more comfortable than perhaps asking for a big, asking for help on a big piece. And, you know, start with perhaps someone who's a peer, who's close to you. Perhaps it's about, you know, reviewing work or giving you feedback or providing support on a project, all of those sorts of things. I think pay attention to obstacles. We know that all of us, you know, our ego gets in the way here, our fear, reputation, everything, our vulnerabilities, everything starts to kick off here. There's a lot of stories that are going to come up. And so, you know, pay attention to that. Think about fair exchange when we say that. It's really about, you know, being in equal exchange. So if someone offers you a whole bunch of help, sometimes, you know, and I think this is an interesting one from the mentor space, often in a mentor relationship, you know, a mentor will give us their time, their advice, their experience. And most of the time, the give back that a mentor experiences, the appreciation of your time. So as a mentee, and I know Oscar going to touch on this, I won't dive into it too much, but, you know, actually giving feedback, demonstrating that you're listening and applying, and just acknowledging and being grateful for their time and showing that appreciation as well. I think the final piece here is, you know, don't be afraid of a no. Someone who says no is setting good boundaries. And that's another thing we're really passionate about. We won't go into that tonight. But don't be afraid of a no. No is not now, not yet, or not that. Well, could you do that as well? And I think all of us can probably start to get a little bit more comfortable, both saying no and receiving the no as well. So our final message, as we hand you over to Oscar, is who is on your team? Thinking around, and we like to talk personal, professional, although obviously for tonight's conversation, we're focused here on professional, but now who is on your team? Who are you bringing into your world? Who can support you, who can help give you access to opportunities, access to information, and you can really leverage their skill, capability, experience to help you go quicker, further, faster. So on that note, Oscar, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks so much, Kate. Amazing distillation of wisdom across many decades brought in to your conversation. I hope everyone has picked up the amazing pearls of wisdom in there. And the barrier is often the way. A no is just not now. I'd love you to think about this. Don't get a mentor. That's the last thing you should do. That's my biggest piece of advice for tonight. Don't get one mentor, get many. So rather than focusing on one mentor based on what their personality might do or what attracts you to them, think about mentoring through the lens of what are the skills and capabilities you want to learn for a period of time, rather than, wow, what an amazingly clear communicator Kate is. How careful and accurate is the way Fiona uses language to make a point. Now, if that's something you want to learn about, great, go and have a conversation with them. But if you're ever contracting with only one mentor, you're doing a couple of things. You're not giving yourself the opportunity to learn. You're not giving yourself the opportunity to be curious. And you're not looking at things through the lens of micro skills and bigger capabilities. When I say don't get one mentor, I say maybe start with thinking about 4 types of mentors. And I want you to just do a little mental check with yourself right now. If you have a mentor in your network or you're looking to get a mentor in your network, which one are they? I'm going to talk about 4 types of mentors. The first one is a teacher. The next one is a promoter. The next one is your pit crew. And the last one is a butt kicker. So let me explain each of those 4 types of mentors to you. A teacher is an architect. They've gone ahead, they know the landscape, and they can plot for you what's coming next. Architects are really important if you're trying to build capabilities in areas that you know there's a relatively linear pathway for you to explore. Architects hold a map for you and say, hey, great, you've done this today. How are you going to get to there tomorrow? And they've been there. They've actually walked the steps. Now, in our modern, more complex, collaborative and creative landscape in business, those mentors may not even exist in this time zone. One of the powerful things about LinkedIn is you can find a global expert anywhere in the world and reach out to them and ask them to be a mentor. And if you think you've reached mastery in a particular area of your skill set, maybe you need to mentor in that area as well. So architects hold the blueprint. They show you the future. Promoters are there to anticipate for you. Promoters in the workplace might say, I was just in a conversation with the Project Possum team, and Project Possum needs someone with your detail-orientated skill sets, and I know that's an area of development you're working on. Go and chat to Mary, who's the head of Project Possum, and talk to her about your development plan. And that might be something that the promoters, they're always looking over the horizon. If you've ever seen the movie Jerry Maguire, well, the promoters are like your agent. They're anticipating your next role for you. So it's not just your job inside the organization, but it's also your job outside the organization as well. So the first one we've got is a teacher. The next one, promoter. The next one's pit crew. These are people who are asking you, how are you? Are you taking care of yourself? You look really tired at the moment. I thought your eyes were hazel, Oscar, but they're actually bloodshot. When was the last time you took a holiday? These are people you want in your network because they've got your back when it comes to all kinds of things around your health. But they also think about when's a time possibly for a career break, or when's a time to study. So the pit crew critical in nurturing you, and they're going to help you understand what you need to feed yourself when it comes to the next steps. So we have the teachers, we have the promoters, and we have the pit crew, and then we have the butt kickers. They're like your personal trainers. They're going to hold you accountable, make sure you turn up. And not only do they make sure you turn up, they're not going to accept your excuses. They're not going to accept your stories. You know, I'm the son of a first-generation migrant family. My parents fled Italy after the war. They came to Australia, and my dad said to me, Oscar, whatever you do, go to university, get a job, become an accountant. Accountants will never be out of work. Well, that's true kind of today, but artificial intelligence may put accountants out of work. But for my time in the workplace, all I wanted to do was go to university and study to become an accountant. In fact, I got a graduate position and I studied part-time and I worked full-time. In my 6th week of working as an audit clerk in an accounting firm, counting spark plugs at Rushcutters Bay in a Jaguar dealer, my manager said, "Oscar, we've got a problem. Let's chat at lunchtime." And over lunchtime, my manager, Robert, read out 20 phone numbers to me. And I wrote down 20 phone numbers. 16 of them I wrote right, and 4 I wrote wrong. Now, the ones I wrote wrong, I transposed the numbers, which meant I had something called dyscalculia. Think of it as dyslexia, only as it relates to numbers. Now, remember, my dad had told me, "Oscar, become an accountant. Oscar, work hard." All of a sudden, my dream about becoming an accountant's blown out of the water, and my manager says to me, "I'm going to bring my boss in next week because this isn't going to work." We were actually on physical spreadsheets. They were A3 pieces of paper, well before Microsoft Excel and even Lotus 123. I know Carl and Peter, you can remember those bits of software out there. Now, for the rest of my career, I've had to sell to accountants. I've had to propose business cases to accountants, and I have always fostered people in my network who are strong financially. So sometimes you want to think of mentors as people who amplify strengths or they mitigate weaknesses. So for me, be deliberate in thinking about what sort of mentor you want. Now, as you do that quick little audit, you think about promoters, you think about teachers, you think about pit crew, and you think about butt kickers. We tend to think of our mentoring relationship as one of those types of people. So here's a quick diagnostic for you to do. You need those 4 people in your network. You need to be speaking to them once a quarter. So within a period of a year, you're going to see those mentors at least 4 times. It's the quality of your relationship, not the quantity, as Kate mentioned earlier on. It's not enough to have 1,000 LinkedIn contacts. Who cares? You can only keep a relationship really with 4 people deeply, 12 people loosely, and 150 actively. The next diagnostic you want to do on your network is how many of those people are inside and outside of your organization. 50% should be inside your organization, 50% outside your organization. And if you're running your own business, think about 50% being client side and think about 50% being industry side. For the 50% that are outside your organization, use this diagnostic as well. Half of those people should be inside Australia and half of those people should be outside of Australia. We all operate in a global market. And one of the questions you might want to ask your mentor is, what do I need to do to be the best in the world in my particular field? Now, quite often, if you are the best in the world, you'll know that already because people are asking you to speak at events. But if you're not the best in your world, find out who is speaking at those events and go and ask them if they could mentor you in how they develop that. Finally, I want to talk about the difference between micro skills and capabilities. When we think about capabilities, Kate was talking about some of those earlier on as she moved professions from chartered accounting into her own business. She needed a completely different network and a completely different skill set. Sometimes the mentoring we need is 90 days. And sometimes the mentoring we need is 12 and 24 months. But please make it specific to a capability that you want to develop. For example, for me, one of the things I often struggled with is everybody uses this word, the business case. I don't know what the business case is. Everybody talks about the business case like I should know what the business case is. So I was just honest and said to our chief financial officer, what's a business case? He goes, oh, Oscar, why don't you set up some time and a coffee and I'll show you what a business case is. Now, if you want to be great at selling, understand what the finance people need to approve. And if you want to be good at finance, figure out what those cheeky salespeople are trying to do to you. And maybe if you're in finance, you need to work with a salesperson. It's opposites that are really useful when you think about your mentoring relationships here. So butt kickers, promoters, pit crew, and teachers. Make sure you've got one of those 4 people at a minimum in your network, and then start building it. 50% inside your org, 50% outside, half in Australia, half overseas. Thanks for listening.
So thank you so much. I think for me, the standout is, find your opposite. I think that's something that I'm going to really take away, because I've not been doing that. I've always found mentors within my industry, people who are like-minded, people who know what I do, and how I've always thought about how they can help. But this is absolute takeaway. And I'm sure everybody who attended tonight's event would have an insight that was shared by the speakers and your other mentors and facilitators that you want to take away and practice. So it was great to have you all involved. I hope you all enjoyed as much as we did. And we understand that the group sessions may not have provided enough time to find all your answers. So mentoring is a journey, and we encourage you to practice tonight's learnings beyond the event, especially within the LIFT mentoring program. If you wish to continue conversations or would like to see available mentors and mentees in our community, so please visit the LIFT mentoring program and explore the community. Thank you to all involved tonight, especially our guest speakers, group mentors, facilitators, and a special thanks to our MGSM Alumni Association members. See you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.